take that self-responsibility, decide that you are going to do this. You're going to heal. You're going to, work on yourself. You're going to heal parts of you that have been stopping you, and just getting really honest about it. You don't need to guilt yourself. You don't need to shame yourself. And in fact, that's going to prolong it. And then the right things will show up. You talked about being a mirror and having mirrors. When you decide, that's when things move. That's when momentum happens. That's when the right people show up for you. That's when things just start to happen. I know that every single time I make a decision to start something new, to stop something, it's like, even when you stop something, those same reflections stop as well. So it's just, it's so beautiful to be able to see how powerful we are. I'm Taylor Stone. I am a podcaster and a spiritual teacher and healer. Today on Everforward Radio, we talked a lot about frequency, what alchemy is, how you can raise the frequency of your body, how you heal within you, and overall what we're experiencing right now on the planet, and how you can overall navigate through it in order to stay in a high vibration, in order to stay in your peace, and really how to stay in compassion for yourself and for others.
All right, so I have a question to kick this part off. As I was kind of thinking about the last time we spoke, this whole concept of alchemy and what that means, and more importantly, what it looks like or can look like in our life. This concept, I think, is one of those where on the surface level, a lot of people that's like the woo. That's the stuff that is literally just made up. You're literally just thinking some kind of way, and then if you think the stars align, then all of a sudden, your prayers have been answered. There's been manifestation. You actually had anything to do with what is going on in your life. Can you help us kind of break that down a little bit and really kind of decipher more of alchemy in our life, what it looks like, and why it's actually real?
Alchemy has been around for millennia. When you think in terms of chemistry, the process of transforming one substance into another, it's the exact same thing when it comes to raising our frequency in terms of healing. If you look at, a cup of boiling water, that's alchemy because it's transforming in its substance, right? And so when I think of alchemy in the way that I like to teach it, it's the transformation of a lower frequency, something like pain, fear, unworthiness, unconscious energy, even atheist energy that, energy isn't real, and transforming that into higher frequencies like love, like joy, like bliss, like healing. And so we all have the capability to do this. It's the transformation, the conscious thought that we are policing in a sense to where we are making a different decision. Alchemy, in essence, is having a certain way of being, a certain way of doing things day to day, and changing that, making the decision and saying, I am choosing to consciously operate in a different way today. That is alchemy. And so when people think, oh, well, this is too woo and this is too this and that, and it's just out there, there's a very scientific principle to it, just like there is within, quantum physics, our thoughts become things. That's exactly the same process. So the work that I do and the work that I'm teaching is to become your own alchemist, to really embody the alchemist. We all can have healers, we can all have mentors, teachers, coaches, but it's really stepping into the self-healer, really stepping into the self-alchemist, which is a majority of the work that we'll be doing, right? I mean, we can have a mentor, a coach, a teacher, a healer, a fitness class for an hour, but what are you doing those other 12 hours of the day that you're awake? That's really where the self-responsibility, the self-accountability comes in, where you are stepping into that role of transforming what you don't want into what you do want.
You bring up another interesting point there of what are we doing the other 12 hours? What are we doing the other 23 hours? That was always this running joke with personal trainers is, I can be with somebody for an hour and we can crush it. We can do incredible stuff. But the second they walk out that door, or a coach's office or a therapist's office is, what are you doing the other 23 hours? So how important is the work outside of the work for this type of change that we want for our lives and we're working on, but just part of the time?
It's everything. When you, like we talked about, hire someone, and I used to do personal training too, and that used to
Mm.
be a frustration of mine of I want transformation for these people, my clients. I want them to feel what it feels like to have this energy to shed whatever it is that they want to shed. But there's that self accountability, there's that self responsibility, because for me, and with anything, it's about dominance.
Mm.
It's about your dominant energy. It's about the dominance. You could be drinking water all day long, nourishing yourself, and it's okay to have a beer or a glass of wine or whatever you choose, right? Because that, I don't like the word balance, but that's living in a way where your dominant nourishment is going to be of hydrating yourself and eating properly. So for me, it's all about teaching women that I am not your hero. I'm not your guru. I'm not any of that. And you are going to be the one that saves yourself. You're going to be the one that does this work and essentially is going to transform yourself. I can guide you, I can lead you, but I think in essence it's self-mastery, and that's why I'm such a huge advocate of that. I always say that spirituality without self-mastery is delusion, it's suffering, because if you don't take accountability for what's being taught to you and essentially run with it, then you're really doing yourself a disservice in that.
Where do you see people right now, here, mid 2022, doing the biggest disservice to themselves, in kind of looking through the lens of this work that we're talking about?
Judgment. I
Mm.
mean, we talked about
Mm.
grace, earlier. And so I really feel that not only the judgment of their self, the self-infliction, but the judgment of other people. We judge what we don't understand. And I think a big disservice for so many people is right off the bat judging something without being open to it. For me, it's all about, and I just talked about this today, which is funny, it's about taking what resonates and leaving the rest.
Mm.
If I have something introduced to me, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a coach, or whatever that may be, a book, I will read the book, find something that I don't agree with, and say, okay, I just don't agree with that. Right. And continue to read. And I think in this time, we're so quick to judge. We're so quick to not understand something, judge it, and then not look at it again,
Mm.
not pick it up again, not, canceling, right? I mean, cancel culture is everywhere. We are very quick to step into that. And when we judge something, we're essentially damning ourselves because we're not allowing ourselves to be open to that thing. And, because I know so much about energetics and frequency, we're actually inviting that in. So anytime someone tells me that they're
Mm-hmm.
constantly feeling judged, my immediate question is, what are you judging? Because that's what we're going to invite back in.
Where might judgment be living in our lives, existing in our minds, and we're not really aware of it? Does judgment have other faces? Does it feel like other things, but really at the root, this is what we're talking about?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it comes back to the love that you have for yourself. And we all know this, the more that you heal yourself, the more that you heal
Mm.
others, the more that others heal, we heal. So I think when it comes to this work and having less judgment, it resides in our body, it resides in our cells, it resides via our energetic field. The body keeps score, any experiences that we've had, it comes down to what we're open to healing ourselves and loving ourselves more, and just having, again, compassion and grace for other people, even if you have never had that experience. We talked about COVID,
Mm-hmm.
both having it at
Mm-hmm.
one point, and I would be lying if I said I didn't initially have some judgment when I never had it. I very much believed it was real. I very much believed that it was, an illness, but it wasn't until I actually had it that I was like, oh shit, this is this is no
This is
joke.
what it'd be like.
This is very much real. It's very
Yeah.
much real. And so, catching myself and just saying, where can I have more compassion for experiences that I may have never had? And that's what I think makes a great teacher. It makes a great healer. I've experienced so many things throughout my life, amazing things, also not so amazing things, as we all have, but those experiences have led me to have more compassion,
Mm.
to teach about it, and to overall hold more space. So to answer that question, it's in loving yourself, and I know that that's so cliche and people hear that all the time, but doing the necessary healing work, releasing triggers, shadow work, all these things that eventually contribute to you loving yourself more, therefore you love others more.
What are you currently working on most with yourself? And is it ready to be shared in the way that you share it? And is it ready to be a part of how you actually help others? Or are you still in a season that you're trying to decipher? Are you working through judgment yourself? Where is your sticking point, and or how are you bringing it to the table for others?
Oof, what a loaded question.
No
But
pressure.
I think it's such a great question though too. For me, it's all about identifying things that aren't the truth. And what I mean by that is catching myself in all areas, when I'm speaking something out loud, when I'm saying something to myself, and really just asking myself, is that the truth? Is that the truth of things? And so within me, I've constantly been healing things within myself. And when I say healing, I think that gets a little bit confusing because people can think, oh, is she sick? Does she have a disease? Does she have something within her? And it's really about healing, again, the judgment, the things within us that are not of love, that are not of that high vibration of not being able to serve at our highest. And so, something that I just came to me right now is, with everything happening in the world, with all the separation, for me, it's about still seeing everything that's happening in a higher perspective. So an example would be, something happening that's not obviously of love around the world, something horrible happening, and still not judging it and still trying to lift whatever it is, still trying to bless rather than judging. What happens, and what I believe is happening a lot, is when these horrific things are happening in the world, or when more things are being brought to the light, we initially judge it. We judge the person who did it. We judge all of these things. And that's not what, if you even look in years past, that's not what actually transforms everything or anything at all. And so for me, it's being able to see things from a higher perspective, seeing the bigger picture, and just constantly sending love to that thing, whether I agree with it or not.
Oof,
And
that's
I know
powerful, and that's difficult.
it's incredibly difficult, and it does get easier. And that's why I'm always teaching it. And I'm a student myself, but being able to see things and not immediately go into judgment, not immediately condemn them, because what is that doing? It's not right raising the consciousness of the planet. It's actually contributing to that. So teaching that, sharing through my own journey, I feel like I'm always on a mission. I have such an ambitious soul that I'm always trying to up level in every single area of my life, while still giving myself time to rest, not be in that hustle mentality. So many things, but I think that's been the biggest lesson, especially since 2020 started, is seeing things as they are, staying in my lane, and just focusing on the healing, and, working with the quantum field to send these healings, as I am a healer, and not get so wrapped up in the, gossiping, judging. I always call it, when people are getting together and they're commiserating with each other,
truly,
catching that. That's huge. I mean, we've all done it. And for me, it's about nipping it. It's about seeing it and saying, oh, we're in victim right now. Let's get out of that, because there's one thing for just expressing yourself. I think expressing your emotions, that's a huge part to healing, but it's allowing that to happen, but not spreading it everywhere, not texting everyone your issues and going that far. So that is what I am working on, among many other things that I believe is it's a constant and conscious process.
That it is. And thank you so much for sharing that kind of personal insight. And in that, you brought up a really cool concept, healing. It's one that, when we first hear that word, I think a lot of us, most of us even assume that it's where I'm healing from a physical ailment. I'm healing from an injury. I'm healing from surgery. But that word, definitely for me, and it sounds like for you, has taken on a whole new way to apply it. Healing emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And in our wellness journey of all the things, it's kind of, I think in this aspect I'm talking about, it's one of those ways that we didn't realize we were actually injured or wounded until we begin to start trying to heal that thing. Or something comes up and say, hey, I've been over here wounded this whole time. Can you define that for us? Or how would you describe to the person who is unaware of healing in this application?
So healing can be anything as, small and minute as, you were on the playground, you got pushed down, and then you have this awful experience of, what you view male to be. It could be a huge breakup. It could be having some traumatic experience. And I never like to place more, I never like to label one trauma as being more, defining than another, because that's just not fair, because that's not my place. Everyone deals with certain things in their own way, having abusive parents. And so from my perspective, knowing that we all live and have lived thousands of lives, you have to think of the amount of trauma that we've all collected over the years. And even just in this lifetime, where we have had experiences that made us feel unworthy, not being chosen, having certain things break our heart, or having here's a big one, which I'm sure a lot of people have had to heal from, that, rich people are bad, rich people are this, because our parents said at one point that the reason why they didn't have money is because having wealth is going to make you greedy. All these certain things, we're all at some level healing. So it's not just about, there is the healing of the very physical ailments, as we've all experienced from, the pollution and things like that. But when I think of healing, and I never thought of this initially, because my background is more of the exercise science space. But when I now teach healing, it's about anything that is preventing you from stepping into your true self, anything that's preventing you from stepping into your power, or being expressive, or being vulnerable, or just living through love, being the person who just has that energy of openness. It's not about who's the loudest. It's not about who can shout the most, but it's about who can hold space. It's about how are you seeing the world right now? And if you're seeing the world in such a destructive and horrible place, that's something that you can heal as well, as I mentioned, of just the non-judgment, and knowing that, we're not perfect. And so things that happen are something that, because we're all connected, there is a part in us, because we're seeing it via how things manifest as a mirror, then there's something within me to heal as well. So there's so many components to this, but essentially whatever is preventing you from seeing things in love, whatever is preventing you from expressing more love, whatever is holding you back from stepping in more to your role, because I know a lot of women, especially, have that unworthiness of I'm not worthy, or women, I call it the nun syndrome, from religious programming. That's also things you need to heal as well, where, we thought that in order to be worthy of God, that we had to just be, in purity.
Yeah,
we had
truly,
to just be,
yeah.
we had to dress,
Yep.
from head to toe and clothes. And it's just, these things are very real and they're very relatable. And I think having my experiences, both in healing the physical body, and then also healing from religious programming, and healing from, things that have happened to me in the past, it has really helped me to understand how to relate to women, and understand, and let them understand too, that they're not alone in this, that we all have things that we're healing from. And whether you're conscious, and I use the word conscious, meaning you're just aware of it. A lot of people who are walking around, driving around, honking, getting angry, they're triggered and they're not conscious of that. They're not conscious of what's actually contributing to that. And so for me, it's about bringing awareness to it and letting everyone know that you can heal absolutely anything.
How, when was your
Right
own
now.
personal, no, that too. Absolutely. Yes, you can, right here, right now. But curious, personally for you, when was this awakening for you? We've kind of talked about where you are and what you do now, and your explanations and interpretations have been so great, but I know you didn't just wake up like this.
I did not know.
What did you go through? Can you share with us, please, a little bit of your backstory that got you to what we're talking about today, and how you're just this light now today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Catholicism, and when I was, I think it was 20 years old, I was really interested in learning more about myself. I was really more interested in connecting with a higher power. And I converted to Mormonism, the LDS church, seeking something outside of me. I ended up getting married to someone who also was in the LDS church. In retrospect, everything's perfect, but for me, in looking back, it was a complete misalignment. I was seeking God in another church, not understanding it was within myself. And long story short, I started to have these visions, of just my life not going the trajectory where I wanted it to. I think I was 28 at the time, dancing in the NFL, really just not like understanding what I'm supposed to do because I was, in a marriage and I was doing something that I love to do. Once that ended, we ended up moving, and I kept having these dreams and I kept having these things happen over and over again. So I was a very, I guess you could call, religious person at the time, but I had no awareness of spirituality. I didn't know anything about manifesting or any of the, quote unquote new age things that we have now, though it's not really new. I'm learning more and more. But
the new old age.
Yeah, exactly. But through that, ended up starting to see so many different visions. That's kind of when I had my awakening, so to speak. I started to see certain things like angel numbers, and I started getting these messages in my dreams, and I started just having all of this awareness, which kind of made me feel crazy, as it does for most people.
As it does. Yeah.
As it does. And, I started just realizing that I was in the wrong life. And I quite literally, a lot of people don't necessarily, I think, believe this story, but it's so true. And it was time coming, it was a buildup. It wasn't just like one day I was like, all right, well, I'm just not feeling it, I'm out of here. It was more of, a couple years in the making. But one day I just woke up, I packed up everything in my car and I left. And I ended up calling my dad and I said, hey, I left. Can you meet me in Dallas to help me drive back to Arizona? And it was ever since then, it was like, I was just getting these messages and this information, which I now know is from my soul, basically telling me it's time, this contract, this agreement is over. And when I moved back to Arizona, it just was one of those things where I just kept expanding. I would go to Barnes and Noble all the time, read every book I could, got into podcasts. I think that's the first place: podcasts, reading books, learning more about this work, energetics, connecting to yourself. And so for me, it was really being able to kind of disconnect from religion. At the time, I'm not a religious person anymore, allowing, the kind of that anger of like, why is this happening? But yet being able to now, 7, 8 years later, being able to come back to connecting with God or whatever you choose to call, and not having it be a part of religion. Because I think that there's so many people who are in that journey right now, especially with, the Great Awakening and COVID and all that, wanting to find connection, but having such a bad taste in their mouth because of what they experienced. And so for me, it wasn't this like full blown awakening. It was more like the little messages that our soul will give us. And if we don't listen, it turns into chaos. And that's when disease happens. That's when, upheaval happens. And so it always makes me smile when I look back that I trusted myself, because I didn't have my own bank account at that time. I wasn't working. I ended up moving in with my brother for 2 months. Then I moved in with my aunt for an entire year. And at that point, I think I was 30 years old. So it wasn't exactly like this pride or this, I wasn't exactly proud of that, but I knew it was necessary. And it led me to where I am right now, in constant, just really listening to myself, researching, seeking, if you want to call it. And, again, getting to know my soul and listening more to that information.
Would you say that last part you just said there, is that kind of it? A question that just popped in mind was, oftentimes this hard work, these uncomfortable parts that our own description and on the surface level, outside looking in, often don't look like success. It doesn't look like work. It doesn't look like moving forward in life. It looks like your life fell apart. It feels like your life fell apart. It looks like moving in with family members, crashing with friends. But it sounds like in your heart of hearts, for the first time, or for the first time in a long time, you knew this is what you actually needed to do and this was right. how can you, or what would you say to someone who is questioning that right now? It's like, I know that this is going to get even more messy, or there's no way that this is going to be a pretty situation, but I just know for some reason, it's what I have to do, or it's what I need to do in order to know what I have to do next.
The soul does not operate through logic at all. It operates through inspiration, intuition. And so when I was in that scenario, not really knowing anything about this work, I had that feeling, right? That feeling that you're meant to do something. And for me, and this may sound really morbid to people, but I think it will really resonate, is, I knew that my soul would be dying a little bit if I didn't leave. I actually had dreams of that, which,
Oof, wow.
was really scary at times, because who wants to have a dream about that? But I was having it over and over and over and over again. And I had to make the decision that I would honor that regardless of my scenario. And I feel very privileged to have had family in order to, that they would allow me to move in with them, and, they would support me. But it was one of those scenarios where I had to jump, I had to just make a move, and I couldn't allow myself to think of the logistics and where am I going to go? And am I going to get a job? And how is this going to work out? It was like, I had to go. Like, I just had to get up and to go. And so for those of you who are going through this, you have to trust that, and you have to trust that you will be supported. Our soul had a plan before we came. Everything, there's a blueprint, quite literally, before we incarnated, of how things are supposed to go, and you will be taken care of no matter what. You will be supported. And at the time, I believed that a little bit. Now I believe that wholeheartedly, that if something is not feeling right within me, if something, and this is not uncomfortableness, right? I mean, there's a big difference between, oh, this is scary, this is a little bit fearful,
Sure,
I'm a little bit hesitant to do this. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that where your body is just like, I can't move forward with this. I can't do this. It's just that if I do this, I'm going to dishonor myself. And so listen to your body, start paying attention to the information that's coming, and, trust. You don't always have to have this big grandiose plan. And I don't believe that we are meant to know that. I don't believe that, I often think about this. If we had, the grand plan from, I'm living till 120. I don't know about you guys, but I'm living till 120.
I'm with you. Yeah.
If we had the plan and the blueprint and we saw it in front of us, we would lead an incredibly boring life. And we don't want that. We did not come here to have that. And so I remind myself of that often, that, this can be a fun journey. It can be a game. It can be exciting. And it really comes down to getting to know thyself, right? It's like finding out where it is that, you can listen more to your intuition, where you can lead more with your knowingness and less with logic, because the soul doesn't compute. The soul does not work that way. Logic is man-made. Logic is not something that we were ever meant to utilize, though, of course, with
just
time.
Figured it out somehow.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, with, among other things.
Truly.
Yeah. And so that's where I would start listening to yourself, getting quiet. It's uncomfortable, believe me, but you have to do that in order to listen and know your next steps.
Oftentimes in our healing journey, we come across situations like yours where we absolutely need help. And sometimes, you might have the privilege, you might have the ability, you might have the whatever, to have a person or people in your life that will just open the door for you, will provide whatever assistance you need at that moment for whatever the period of time is. But sometimes, especially when it's a situation like this of, I need to finally lean into and listen to my soul. I need to step away from something that logically looks perfect, and by leaving it sounds asinine. And that helps. Sometimes we need to kind of translate that. We're not looking for validation. We're not looking to justify, but we do need to kind of learn how to communicate what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and why it's important to a person or persons, so that they can properly help us and be in a receptive place themselves for this to really work, or just to be able to have the maximum potential how did you do that, or how would you describe that for somebody to do right now? If you didn't have to go through that yourself, or how can we effectively communicate that to others so that we can really be where we need to be with maybe who we need to be?
Communication is everything. And even to this day, when I'm going through something, I'm processing something, I will communicate that to my husband and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling today. It's not you, I promise you, because we can tend to think that something is wrong, or, we tend to project certain things. And so I think communication of that is incredibly important. I'm also a big fan of taking huge social media breaks. Last year, I think I took a 2-month break, then I took another 6-week break, and I'm constantly doing that because I want to make sure that I'm honoring myself and making sure that I am processing it correctly, and not just, pushing it under the rug or pushing it back down to my, into my body, where we want to actually
Starting
release
the problem, the course all over
exactly.
again. Yeah.
That's obviously never works in any capacity. And so I think communication is absolutely everything. Back when I was 28, 29, 30, going through this process, I didn't have this work. It was available, but I wasn't yet conscious of it. So of course, then I did things that, probably weren't the best in terms of communication. I didn't know, how to fully express myself. I had a slew of my own healing to do, but now knowing what I know, would that have saved the relationship? Absolutely not. It would have just probably made it a little bit easier than it was.
True.
But I
Yeah.
think it was perfect how it was supposed to happen. And for me, it's all about just reminding myself that communication is really important, but you also have to have the other person who is self-aware as well, right? You can't have a conversation with someone who is going to just blame you and project onto you. It needs to be at the same level of maturity. And so I think really, to answer your question, it's about communicating as best as you can, being proactive with it as well, and saying, like I mentioned, this is what's happening right now. I would love and appreciate your support, but just as a heads up, this is what I'm going through. I'm not asking, and maybe they do want to hold space for you, but if they don't hold the capacity to do that, then you do want to find a supportive space, to have those conversations and, really have that support.
Well, I like to think that this is a safe space for this. This is a space, this show, this content, people like yourself and the work that you do is exactly it. For me, especially, it's the whole reason why I'm here, but is the reason why I love having conversations with people like yourself, so that the listener, the viewer here can just tap into virtually, remotely, even for just a moment, or however long this conversation, this podcast is, to let your consciousness be in that space, and to know that there is a possibility for that capacity. So, and really it's just, I think, a mirror as well. We kind of have these opportunities. We read these books, listen to these podcasts, go to these whatever. And it's more of like an awakening. Our mirror is held up to the capacity that we hold for the change and the permission to change, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And, find that community. And if you don't have a community, like you mentioned, really just engulf yourself into this work. When I first moved back to Arizona, not having any money to my name, not having a job, it was really my decision of listening to inspirational talks on YouTube and listening to podcasts and reading as many books as I could to, heal from that scenario, that situation, and also to potentially build the business that I have now. And I didn't really have that support of, I am using this word a lot, but the conscious relationship and friendships. I had more of like the surface level friendships, which I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to at the time. That doesn't mean they're bad people, but it just wasn't the support system that I needed and that I wanted. And so I did have to, in that time, do it alone, but have virtual mentors. I think that's very underrated, right? To be able to listen to a podcast and listen to different people and soak up as much content as you can. You can learn how to do anything nowadays,
Truly,
with everything that we have, right? It's probably going to take a little bit slower of time because there's ways in which you can speed up and accelerate it, but you can absolutely change your life with the resources that we have right now. And so I think the main thing is, take that self-responsibility, decide that you are going to do this. You're going to heal. You're going to, work on yourself. You're going to heal parts of you that have been stopping you, and just getting really honest about it. You don't need to guilt yourself. You don't need to shame yourself. And in fact, that's going to prolong it. And then the right things will show up. You talked about being a mirror and having mirrors. When you decide, that's when things move. That's when momentum happens. That's when the right people show up for you. That's when things just start to happen. I know that every single time I make a decision to start something new, to stop something, it's like, even when you stop something, those same reflections stop as well. So it's just, it's so beautiful to be able to see how powerful we are, and that anything that we really set into motion, and anything that we, put our mind to, and we have to have action. I think that's a big piece, especially even in the spiritual community. Like we have to take
truly,
action. Can't just sit down. Right. But it's such a beautiful thing to see, not only my life, but now probably thousands of women who have taken my courses and programs, to see things change within them. And, it really all started from me making that initial decision, as we talked about, and taking that leap, and just trusting myself, trusting that I'll be supported, and knowing that there's a bigger picture. There's always a bigger picture.
Well, here's my favorite part of the show. One of my favorites, where I get the opportunity to invite you a little bit closer into my world, and to get your interpretation of two words that have radically shaped my life, from a place that radically wrecked my life. Ever forward, this phrase that my late father used to say all the time, is what I ran from for many, many years. But the moment that I decided and I took action to run towards it, it has given me everything, has given me so much purpose and passion and just happiness and fulfillment and yada, yada, yada. But I'm always curious now that I've taken action with it, I want to get my guest's interpretation of that. So after we've had this incredible conversation and the work that you do and how you help so many other people, and just now through the lens of living a life ever forward, how would you describe that? What does that mean to you?
I love that, by the way, that you took that and named your podcast after that. That's amazing. For me, ever forward is resilience. And we can't live life without resilience. We have to have it, because things are not going to work out the way we want it to. We're going to have contrast. We're going to have an ebb and flow of things. We're going to have things seemingly come crashing down on us and feel like life is no longer working for us. But when we tap into resilience and we recognize that we're powerful and that we can overcome absolutely anything, then life just gets that much easier, because we know it's just a stepping stone to something else. And we again tap into that part of us that is within us whenever something happens. And we know that we can overcome whatever it is that life throws at us. Resiliency
is it's an important one. And it's a great interpretation. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Taylor, thank you again so much for your time. And again, coming back, here on the show. Of course, I'm gonna have all of your information down in the show notes, the video notes for everybody. But if they want to learn more about you and the work that you do and just tap into this other great resources that you are, where can they go? Where are you hanging out the most online?
The best resource and place to learn more about this work is my podcast, which is called Vibe Higher, which you can find in all areas and places. And then also on Instagram, which is I am Taylor Stone.
All right. Well, Taylor, thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Thank you. I loved it.